The Aliens vs. Predator films have never been cinematic triumphs. Some even argue that they diminish both franchises merely by existing. Not entirely fair, given how bad most of the non-crossover sequels were, but I remain rather fond of the first iteration of this pairing, a 4-issue miniseries from Dark Horse Comics that I consider to be in some ways the peak of both the Aliens and Predator franchises. The premise of this 4-issue series is quite simple. A group of young males are going on a ritual hunt under the guidance of an older huntmaster. The hunting ground, a planet the humans call Ryushi, is seeded with the chosen big game, in this case these familiar xenomorphs, and the hunt is on. Only they didn't realize that humans set up a colony on Ryushi and started ranching since the last time they were there. Things go awry, the huntmaster is wounded and ends up in the town infirmary under the eager eyes of the settlement's doctor, and the unsupervised kiddos run wild trying to kill the bugs that give as good as they get in that fight. There's no grand multi-millennia narrative that retcons humanity into a broader galactic history. It's just a local story about a hunt going wrong and some poor bastards caught in the middle of it. So, quick summary, we open with Machiko Noguchi, an executive with the Chigusa Corporation. Yes, Wayland Yutani has competitors. She's been assigned to run the Ryushi operation. She gets no respect from the ranchers. The technical staff still reports to the old supervisor 6 months later. He's scheduled to leave on the next ship, but they only come seasonally. And she spends most of her time in her air-conditioned office avoiding the dust, heat, and stench of the place. Don't forget that these are human beings you're dealing with. Treat them as such. And it wouldn't hurt for you to loosen up some either. Get out of your office once in a while and get some rinth shit between your toes. Rinth are big rhino-like herd animals. It's what the ranchers there raise for interstellar export. I'd hate to see the price of that steak. So Machiko goes out into the field to change her image and start getting right with the ranchers. And in the process, she starts to appreciate Ryushi as more than a revenue stream. My job, my life to that point, had been concerned with schedules and numbers and quarterly reports. A full, satisfying life, I thought. Seeing the sunset that day, I suddenly realized how much I'd been missing. Little did I know that would be the last time I'd ever view a sundown with any emotion other than dread. None of them realized they've built their new homes in the middle of a game reserve. In some ways, it's a return to the original Alien concept. The humans aren't Marines, they aren't a badass spec ops team like in the original Predator. They're just regular working folks. Ranchers, freighter pilots, mechanics and technicians, a doctor, and a white-collar paper pusher. People trying to do regular jobs who are completely unprepared for close-quarters combat with extraterrestrial monsters. And in keeping with the evil corporation thing, the colony requests Marines, but the request is denied because the company wants to capture the aliens alive. Who doesn't love the smell of hubris in the morning? So Machiko steps up, Ellen Ripley style. Old school female action hero that makes mistakes and can't do it alone, but who learns from those mistakes and musters up strength she didn't know she had to survive. While chosen for very different circumstances, she's the leader of the town, both by established rules and by the much more important fact that she stood up and took action to protect the community. The conflict between the corporate types and the ranchers is set aside to work together against a common threat. This theme comes back again when she's paired up with the Huntmaster, who she comes to think of as Broken Tusk. He's responsible for his own group and is not above killing a few of his hooligans if they step too far out of line. For example, when he catches one with a child's skull in his trophy bag. For those unfamiliar with the Predator films, they make a point of only killing armed adults, combatants. There are rules. Machiko and Broken Tusk work together in common cause, and they both bring a distinct outlook to the fight. Broken Tusk is a better fighter than a human could be, but his ways are more elegant and not always the most practical. The outcome of the battle was never in doubt. I just didn't have time to wait for it. The two of them go into the hive together, fight against tall odds, kill the queen, and do the closest thing they can to nuking the site from orbit. Broken Tusk dies from his wounds, but she's earned his respect. He marks her as a sign to all his people that she stands among the hunters. But it's more than that. The first Predator film is nominally set in the mid-80s when it was made, but it's really the broader filmic concept of present day, tracking to the audience more than locked to its own place in time. It assumes us as we are now, and to the Predator, we're game animals. Dangerous big game to be sure, but creatures hunted for sport nonetheless. Alien and Aliens are set in the future, with humanity out in space, but still new to it. We're not some galactic empire full of worlds with rich histories, but rather a civilization based on Earth with a bunch of new colonies scattered about in a gold rush of planet founding and resource claiming. And while the first solid confirmation that these stories are set in the same universe came with the trophy case in Predator 2, it's in this comic that the humans of the Aliens era, a foreseeable future, are brought into contact with the older and more advanced Predator culture and for the first time fight alongside each other as equals. It's a coming-of-age story with Machiko as a proxy for humanity. The series folds more of this into the story with Issue 0, originally published in the Dark Horse Presents anthology series and later on its own. The dialogue is entirely between two men, space truckers essentially, on watch as their ship hauls the interstellar equivalent of cattle cars to Ryushi for pickup. They pass the time debating ethics and maybe downing a Zima or two, intercut with visuals of the Predator hunting party on their way. What makes us think we can strip mine planets to their cores, or harvest whole species to extinction, or transform entire ecosystems to suit our whims? Be realistic, Tom. Everyone knew Earth's resources wouldn't last forever. What are we supposed to do, ignore the other resources available to us because a million years from now they might be of some use to an emerging life form? Which is an interesting opening, not so much for its content as its framing against the Predator thread, showing an older, more advanced, but also conservationist culture. Scott and Tom here, passing time in the big rig, are sort of humanity trying to figure out how to be something better, or at least something more stable. And part of that is getting out of this technology trap, when technology stops being a tool and becomes its own purpose. It's no longer a means to an end, it's become an end unto itself. We use it like a wall between ourselves and our surroundings. Between ourselves and who we really are. This is addressed in the action with Machiko and Broken Tusk. They're not going in barehanded because that would be suicidally dumb, but their tools are extensions of themselves rather than long-distance shields that separate them from the action. A pistol and this halberd thing are close-in weapons. It could just as easily be a story about drone striking aliens or crashing the cargo ship by remote from a trailer 1,000 miles away. But that wouldn't make for a good story, in part because we're already behind those walls of technology. On some level, we want something immediate and visceral. I mean, look at what we do for a living. Access the computer, punch a few buttons. All the work is done for us. Anybody could do this job with the right training. I want to do something that'll get my heart pounding. And in the end, when the company buys out the whole colony and leaves, Machiko stays behind on Ryushi. I know Broken Tusk's people will be back someday with a new batch of bugs. Then maybe I'll do a little hunting. I can't help seeing this as a shorthand for some level of cultural diffusion. She's still living out there on the New World. She's still a colonist, but it's a smaller footprint, more in tune with the place. She lives there rather than spending time there exploiting it. She's taken on something from this older, more established, more balanced culture, which I know will raise some eyebrows, talking about the Predator culture as though it's some hippie woo-woo nature thing. But it kind of is. They just have no illusions about nature being a hard, bloody struggle. That's part of how they keep their eyes forward on where they're going without losing sight of who they are. We don't all have to go on safari to stay in touch with our humanity, but as a metaphor for getting out into the natural world and enduring some loss of comfort and risk, I think the story has something to offer. Of course, and I'm sure someone has already commented on this before getting to this point, later Aliens vs. Predator stories alternately support my thesis and tear it apart like it was The Last Jedi. I'm just looking at this series as a standalone piece, without considering the search for more money and Machiko's dubious story that inevitably followed. Because this is the best one, the one that had a story to tell more than a release slot to fill. I keep saying Predator because I can't get behind the whole Yautja thing for a multitude of reasons. More than any other attempt at crossing these two franchises, this series successfully blends the action of Predator, humanity fighting against essentially a bigger, tougher, meaner version of ourselves, and the horror of Alien, humanity fighting almost a force of nature, something that we can never reach an understanding with. And it balances that against our own flaws and failings, going to the stars and building an interstellar civilization, but doing it out of greed. Yet, finding something else in the process. It's a realistically optimistic story about stumbling blindly in a dangerous universe, but finding our way. Like the Predator's hunt, we're under-equipped for what we're up against, but we can do this. Yeah, I can see ya. Want some whiskey?